in today's class, we are going to learn about trial and error method, which is another method used for reapportionment of our expense of our service department. Reapportionment of the expenses of service department. In trial and error method, but what we have to notice is we have two steps, right? Like in other methods, suppose if we are given with a primary distribution summary, we can straight away go with the secondary. We have to go with the secondary distribution. But in this case, we will not be given with the primary distribution. There would be two steps always. First, the primary distribution summary. Second, the method used for the secondary distribution. So in both these, we have to work it out using trial and error method. So that's the particular nature of this method. So there are two steps. First, we will calculate the cost of service department cost. Second, redistribution of that to the production department. So calculation becomes a primary, redistribution becomes a second. Now let's see how that is being done. It's simple. It's very simple. But let's see how that is being done. This is the question that we are going to solve in our today's class. As we can see here, we have production department A, B, and C, as well as we have two service departments, that is boiler house and pump room. Okay, this is a typical factory setting. It's a manufacturing company, right? So we have two service department, boiler house and pump house. And you are also given, in the second part, you are also given the basis of allocation of or apportionment of expenses of the service department to various production department as well as the other service department. Why other service department? Suppose if I'm talking about allocation of the expense of boiler house, I'll apportion it to department A, B, C, as well as the service department pump room. Okay, suppose if I am talking about apportionment of the expense of service department pump room, I will apportion that to department A, department B, department C, as well as to boiler room. Right, that's why we say that the apportionment happens in service departments also. We have learned this in the other types also. Now going with how to go with doing this. So in the question, we were given with the primary distribution summary of, in this question, we were given with primary distribution summary of boiler house and pump house, right? So the primary distribution summary of boiler house is 1,17,000 and that of pump room is 1,50,000, 1,50,000. Okay, so in the question, as we normally do, this is the first part, okay? This is the first stage. As we normally do, we will put that in the primary distribution summary in the service department of boiler house as well as pump room. So that's the first stage, okay? Now the next stage is here, we are trying to apportion the expenses of service department initially to service department itself. Suppose, for example, if I'm going with the apportionment of boiler house, I'll take the share of pump room allocated here. That's a first stage which is different from all other methods. That's the first stage which is different from all other methods we had learned till now. So here in the first stage, we will be allocating to the service departments based on their share that should be given in the question. In the normal case, that will be given in the question, or you will be given the logical basis in which that has to be shared. So in the question, it was given, as we can see here, the boiler house expense, 10% of, in case of boiler house, 10% of that, their expense would be shared with pump room. In case of pump room, 20% of their expense will be shared with boiler house. So that's the question. That's what been given in our question. So that's what we are going to do here. So we are trying to share. First, we will take the case of boiler house. So in the case of boiler house, we are not sharing it with the same house. We have to share it with the pump house. So what we do, as we know, as it's given in the question, 10% is shared with the pump room. So we will take 10% of 1,17,000, which is 11,700 shared with the pump room. That's our first stage. Okay, that's our first stage. And then the second stage, we go with pump room. Okay, so we know that 20% of the expense, that is 20% of, in this case, this 20%, that is something which we have to remember. 20% here would be 1,50,000 as per the primary summary of pump room plus 11,700 that was shared in the previous move from boiler house. That needs to be taken care when we take 20% of the expense. Okay, so 1,50,000 plus 11,700, which gives us a total of 1,61,700. 20% of that, which is the expense of pump room, will be shared with the boiler house. So 20% of 1,61,700 will be shared with boiler house. Again, we are going to repeat the same step. Right? This is again repeated as we know that 10% of boiler house expense will be shared with pump room. So what we do? We are nullifying this. So we put 32,340 in brackets, 10% of 32,340, which gives us 234 shared with pump room. That's it. Okay. Now the next stage, we will share the expense of pump room with the boiler house. And we know that 20% of pump room expense is shared with the boiler house. So what we do? We will take 20% of 3,234, which is shared with the boiler house. And we are nullifying this 3,234. We are nullifying that by putting that in the bracket. Repeating it again. How do we repeat? We know that 10% of boiler expense need to be shared with pump room. So we will put this in bracket. We will nullify that. 10% of 6,647 being shared with pump room, which is 65. It is again repeated until the amount is nullified or almost brought to zero. In this method, this is the first stage, almost brought to zero, right? Finally, we had 13 here. So what did we do? We had the 13, which is being shared through. So we nullified that. Together we nullified this. We took the total. Initially, as per primary distribution summary, it was 1,17,000. Then we are going to add all shared, which comes to 1,50,000. Okay. In case of pump room, we add all shared expense, which comes to 1,65,000. Finally, the shared one, okay, which comes to 1,65,000, which is taken to the next stage called the primary distribution summary. Again, reapportioned with the expense of service department. Okay, primary distribution summary, which is reapportioned with the service department expense. Now you might be wanting to ask me now, from where do I get the service department? It has already been apportioned to service department. Some of you might be thinking in that way, but you have to remember that here what we were sharing is only portion of the total expense. See, for example, in case of boiler house, only 10% is shared with the pump room. For boiler house, 10% of the total service department expense is shared with the pump room. What about the 90%? The 90% is shared with A, B, and C. All right. So we have to go with that reapportionment that we had not done. We had done only the 10% when we were doing the first step. Right. Now, the same is the case with pump room. In case of pump room, we can see that only 20% is shared with boiler house. What about the rest 80%? As we answered the previous case, the rest 80% is shared, is reapportioned to the department A, B, and C. So we were complete in the first stage with this part. Now what about the next part, which we have to go with the secondary distribution, which we will see how it has been done. The method is same. It is just divided in the portion of or in the ratio of as it is given in the question. That is 20:40:30%. In case of pump room, it is 40% is to 20% is to 20%. Right? That's what we are doing in the second stage. So 90% of 1,50,000 will be shared. In case of boiler house, 90% of that, because it's given in the question here. You can see that only 10% being shared with pump room. So 90% of that will be shared with A, B, and C. Right? So we do that in the ratio of 20:40:30, which is given in the question. Right. Now, in case of pump room, what we do? 80%, of course, 20% is given to boiler house. We have shared it. We finished it. Now, the rest, 80% needs to be shared between A, B, and C, which is given in the ratio of 40:20:20, which we are doing. So, the total of primary plus the secondary distribution will give us total overhead expenses of production department A, B, and C. Okay, it will be very clear once you do it. When I'm saying it, maybe you will be having little doubt, but it will be clear once you start doing that. In this case, what you have to remember is, in trial and error method, we initially take up a step where we are apportioning that to the service department. Okay, and then what is not shared with the service department will be reapportioned to the production department. That's the second stage, which we did in this exercise. Okay, in our particular exercise, which we are discussing now, we can find that we initially did share with this 10% to pump room. Then we went with sharing this 20% with the boiler room. We finished with that. And the second stage, we went with dealing this 90% of boiler house to 90% of overhead expense. Service department overhead expense is reapportioned to A, B, and C. Now, how did I get 90%? Because 10% is already apportioned to service department pump room. Remaining 90% of the service department boiler house expense is reapportioned to A, B, C in the ratio of 20:40:30%. Right? Same is the case with pump room. We know that 20% of the expense, service department expense of pump room is shared with which department? Boiler house, which is the service department. But what about the 80%? The 80% of the expense will be reapportioned to production department A, B, and C. That's what we are doing at the second stage. So this is all about trial method. In trial and error method, there are two steps. One, portion being shared with the respective service department. Then step two, the remaining service department expense, which is not shared with the other service department, will be reapportioned to the production department. But what we have to remember here is the total which we take here, okay, boiler house, the total which we take here is inclusive of this share, which we are already computed based on our first step. Sometimes students go wrong by taking this as the primary distribution summary. Never do that, because we have already accommodated the 10% or 20% which is given as per the question with the respective service department. So we will have to go with the summary of that stage to the next stage of allocation to the reapportionment to the production department. That you have to remember it very clearly.